Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to all my parliamentary colleagues. Mr. Speaker, the honor is mine once again to rise in this honorable House to make a contribution on a matter of great national importance on behalf of the people of Dennery North. Mr. Speaker, as has been the custom throughout my tenure, I want to preface my substantive contribution to the debate on the motion by extending condolences to a few families in my constituency that are dealing with the loss of loved ones. I also want to extend get well wishes to a number of constituents of mine who have not been well for some time and they are battling some serious health conditions. Also, Mr. Speaker, permit me to reach out this morning in this chamber to a political colleague and former Senator Joachim Henry, who yesterday laid his only begotten son to rest. It was a very painful exercise for the family and for those of us who were in attendance. And I just want to profit the opportunity, with your indulgence and that of colleagues, to reach out to the brother and ask him to keep strong. And it is our sincere hope that God will see him through this period of difficulty. Mr. Speaker, I waited for the statement on the other side in relation to International Firefighters Day, but I guess pretty much consistent with what we saw in the allocations for the fire service. It didn't come as a surprise that nobody remembered them by way of a statement, and so I want to, this morning, on behalf of the parliamentary opposition, on my own personal behalf, and on behalf of the beloved constituents of Dennery North, Mr. Speaker, I want to reach out to the firefighters of our country, the hundreds of them, men and women, active as well as those retired, who have served and made sterling contributions to the development of our country through this noble and honorable field of endeavor. Mr. Speaker, I must mention Troy, Leroy, Willan, Eroff, and a few others who have served with distinction. Mr. Speaker, I take Parliament very, very seriously, and hence my impeccable record of attendance. I am never late, and to the best of my recollection, I have only missed one sitting of Parliament, and that was owing to government business overseas. Mr. Speaker, this morning I find myself in a very unusual situation where I even want to question the relevance of today's sitting when you look at the substantive matters on the other paper. The Prime Minister has come here in the main, notwithstanding the few bills that have to be amended as indicated on the other paper, but in the main to ask for parliamentary approval to extend the state of emergency. And for him, the underlying reason or the justification for seeking that extension is COVID management. Mr. Speaker, let me say this morning that this extension being sought in this House today has absolutely nothing to do with COVID management. But instead, this is a ploy for a failed government to buy extra time to finish projects and to try and gain favor with the electorate on the eve of elections. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister would have been in a better position today to come to this House and to ask for the House to be dissolved and give St. Lucians a date to go to the polls to decide which of the parties they want to govern the affairs of this country moving forward. You have presided over the affairs of this country for 5 years. 5 years. And you want to come in the chamber today to ask for an extension because of COVID? Mr. Speaker, all of the Caribbean jurisdictions that held elections last year did so during COVID. They did so during COVID. Why can't we do the same? But I understand that when you look at poll results and you realize you're not doing so well, and you need the extension, COVID is, Mr. Speaker, the way out. The Prime Minister said that with the current or existing legislation, the COVID Prevention and Control Bill, he does not, to paraphrase, have the latitude to be able to institute or apply a curfew. And that is correct, Mr. Speaker. But what do we need the curfew for? What do we need the curfew for? The time has come, Mr. Speaker, for the people to decide whom they want to preside over their affairs in this COVID environment. You said you have tried. You said, Mr. Speaker, that you have handled the situation in a manner that makes you the envy of the rest of the Caribbean and at one time the world. And I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, that, and I know I run the risk of being misconstrued here this morning to make it seem as if I am insensitive to people who are vulnerable. I have said here, and I will say again, Mr. Speaker, that COVID affects everybody. My own family is not immune. My elderly mother is not immune. And there's nothing I would want to see more than for us to have a handle on COVID. But I am saying today, Mr. Speaker, that the request for an extension of the SOE, where the government is trying to buy an additional 5 months to roll out projects and to reclaim lost political ground, Mr. Speaker, cannot be right. And this is tantamount to an abuse of power. And when you look at cricket, if I were to use a cricket analogy, as I've been using in this house for some time now, Mr. Speaker, there are some rules that are on the cricket books, modes of dismissal. But it would be considered ungentlemanly for you to resort to some of those to get a batsman out. Mr. Speaker, yes, the Constitution makes provisions for the Prime Minister to extend the tenure of his government all the way to October. But is that necessary, Mr. Speaker? To what extent, Mr. Speaker, must we sit by and allow that blatant abuse of power, Mr. Speaker? The people of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker, are waiting to exhale.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Before you let me just speak to the honorable member that
which one?
Remember that the resolution is the extension of the state of emergency. It is not elections, neither is it where the government is extending or buying time for elections. So I'm just putting you on alert that in whatever submission you're making, remember we're dealing with the COVID-19 state of emergency extension and not the elections. Now,
Mr. Speaker, can I respond to you and then you will take the point of order?
now I'm asking if you want to, very well, you may just respond.
But
you may just continue. You may just continue.
If, Mr. Speaker, the state of emergency takes us beyond the 5-year anniversary for election, is it not reasonable for me to infer, Mr. Speaker, that the government is buying more time?
There is no I do not want us, neither do I want, Honorable Prime Minister, I do not want to engage in what you say, but you have the right to infer to yourself in your private conversations and elsewhere anything you so wish. No, I have no issue with that. No issue with that. But when we debating, remember we are guided by the standing orders. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the extension of the SOE is is not the best thing for our country at this point in time. COVID-19 has brought about enough stress to the average citizen in this country. The average business has suffered sufficiently, Mr. Speaker. And as a result, our country is not at a place where it ought to be at a time when so many other jurisdictions in the Caribbean, Mr. Speaker, are making strides as they emerge from the malaise of COVID. And Mr. Speaker, I am saying, Mr. Speaker, that this extension, notwithstanding all what has been said on the other side, that cannot be, Mr. Speaker, for COVID extension. And I remain steadfast in that stance. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, there is so much tension, Mr. Speaker, in this country today. We have seen what the lockdown and the restrictions placed on people can do. We have seen the social ills that have emanated from that, Mr. Speaker. And I am saying that we are treading down a very dangerous road when we look to impose more restrictions on an already frustrated population. And all over the country, every weekend, we are beginning to see that frustration manifesting itself. And I am saying, Mr. Speaker, because I am on the ground, not only in my constituency, but I move sufficiently through the length and breadth of this country to know, Mr. Speaker, that the people of this country have reached a certain degree of frustration as it relates, Mr. Speaker, to the extent to which their liberties are being infringed upon. And so I will say that notwithstanding all of what we've been told by way of COVID management, that cannot be a justification for the extension of this SOE. This is a government, Mr. Speaker, that has run out of time, and they are using COVID as a guise to buy more time, to finish programs, and to give themselves a chance at the elections. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is my short submission to the debate on this particular motion.